Hello, guys. Joel here from the OnlineTestConf. Welcome back. Before I introduce our next speaker, I do want to say that we have started getting suggestions for your lightning talks. So if you have something to say, don't be afraid. Go ahead and share it with us. It's going to be a great idea, something very, very cool that we want to do. We want to make sure that this OnlineTestConf is for all of us, but from all of us. So as much as you can, please go ahead and do it. Once again, also, we want as many people as possible to know about the OnlineTestConf. I was just asking about 5 minutes ago if this was the first OnlineTestConf. No, it's actually the third one. But that only comes to show that many testers, many of our peers are not aware of this event. So if you can, just go ahead and tell other people. It's free. You can just log in. No need to do anything else. And if you don't even have time right now to see the sessions, you will be able to download them later on this week and obviously gain from all these knowledge. So that's about it for commercials. And I want to introduce our next speaker. Karishma, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Karishma. You can actually take the screen if you want. So to very quickly introduce Karishma, because she will do it herself. Karishma has been in testing for about 6 years, mostly in the field of automation, where she has gained quite a lot of experience on that. And she will be talking, I really love the name of this session, Mythbusters on Test Automation, where she will be explaining some of those myths and how actually we can overcome them once we actually start working. So Karishma, the floor is yours. And as a reminder to everyone, questions, go ahead and ask them using the Q&A. You can also use Slack for that. It's harder for me to take them, but if you want, go ahead and use it as well. Karishma, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Joel. Thanks for the introduction, and also thank you so much for giving us this wonderful platform to share our knowledge and questions. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time to attend these sessions. I know it's late at some parts. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, to begin with, my topic is myths and reality, mostly myths on test automation. Before we do that, let me introduce myself. I'm Karishma Kolli. I work with FINRA. It's a financial industry regulator in the US. I started as an estate in 2011, straight out of college. I'm really passionate about automation. My friends say it's because I'm too lazy. Could be. But I love traveling, and I also love food. I'm a big foodie. All the junk food like French fries and ice creams. Not encouraging anyone to do it, but that's just me. Okay, let's get into our topic. So it's a mythbusters on test automation. When I start talking about this, some of you might feel like this is really basic. Why is this girl talking about this? But when I've been doing automation testing for 6 years, and I realized the things what we do on everyday basis is not very simple and straightforward as we think they are. To us, yeah, sure, this is what we are capable of, we are not capable of. But someone who doesn't do this on everyday basis, they don't understand this. For someone who is acting as an audience for us, don't have the same view as we have on test automation. So I thought it is our responsibility to share the knowledge with others what actually test automation is. It is cool and we all accept it, but there are some catches to it. So we all know the basic types of test automation. We are very familiar with the pyramid here. So we have the unit test, we have the integration, which could be your component integration or an API. We have UI testing, we have load, we have performance. If you look at the pyramid on the right side, your unit test fall the base. These are the biggest chunk of tests that we need to have. It is easier for our developers to say, these are not needed when we have automation taking care. Why do we still need unit tests? No, if you look at the pyramid, the size keeps reducing. Unit tests should take care of the very tiny, at the atom level, we need this test. And we cannot, as the pyramid says, manual testing cannot be eliminated. It is part of our testing, but this is how we design our testing. People have great myths even in this. If API testing is done, we don't have to do UI testing, but that's not the case. UI testing is our client facing testing, so we need to test that. Another misconception is that one automation tool will fulfill all my testing needs. It's really easy for people who don't do automation testing to think, okay, we will just get a tool and it will take care of everything for me. It can take care of my load testing, my API, my UI testing. But no, there are multiple tools. If you have different needs, you need to pick these different tools. You cannot expect one tool to do all these different kinds of testings, right? If you have specific needs, we need to pick those different tools. As we say specific tools, that means sometimes we need different skill set as well, which we often tend to forget or ignore. All right, we have an automation engineer and they'll take care of every single type of testing for us, which may not be the case based on the tools we pick. So that's also another thing that we need to keep in mind. Functional testing on UI should verify everything. This is like the most common thing I ever heard. Like, people automatically assume when you're doing UI testing, like you test everything on the UI, given from the image quality, pixel, the color of your text, every single thing is covered under functional testing on UI is what the biggest misconception is. Yeah, sure, we can do that. If that's what we want, we pick the tools based on that. Like Puppeteer, it's my new favorite tool. It's by Google, which will take screenshots and do the comparisons. But it again depends on what is important for you, what are the tools you are using. Is it smart enough to make it part of your functional testing or not? So when we talk about functional testing, it is the test to test the functionality. It is not to test everything on the UI, but we want to test it through the UI because that is what our clients or customers will be doing. 508 compliance, that's a big thing. If we want that, yes, we will have, that's important for us. And if we think it's really huge and it's taking a lot of time for manual, sure, we can automate. But the point is we need to keep them as separate suites. So we have this flexibility to run whichever we want, and we don't end up with like a big giant suite which will take care of our functionality, our UI, our 508 compliance, all this. So it is good to decide on what we need, and it is always ideal to keep our suites separate. That'll help us keep our code easier, and it'll also help us maintaining it, because that's something we need to keep doing. And also we must select our UI test very careful. If we remember the pyramid from the previous slide, it is almost on the top of the pyramid. We cannot add as many UI tests as we want. Yes, we will add your UI tests, but we need to be careful of what we pick there. So the value in functional testing, when we automate it, it should be easy to run, easy to maintain, and easy to debug, while still giving the value of the trust we need from the automation. Don't let it fail on timeout. So this is very common in UI testing. There will be cases where your test will just time out. They are not passed, they are not failed. It's timed out. You don't know. It could happen because of multiple reasons. It could be something on your server side. It could be something your application timed out. It's not your test suite fault. It's not the application fault. It's all the intermittent pieces that act in between. One of them might not be working as you expected right now. So what do? If you know for a fact that this will happen at one particular page, for example, think like this keeps happening on this particular page because it takes a form, it needs to go update my databases, it needs to register, come back. So this will always take a lot more time than the regular timeout that I set, which is 30 seconds or whatever it is. So you may set a little bit of higher timeout for that particular, but it's always within the acceptable limits. If it takes like 10 minutes or so, no, we will not do that. We will not wait on that one test case forever. If we have such special cases where we know it is going to take a lot of time every single run, or that's the nature of it, so no, we will not include it in our test suite. We would rather handle it manually. right? It just doesn't mean that we have to include everything in our automation. We all understand that there are limitations to it, and sometimes, though it can do, it is not logical to do it. Yeah, sure, if I add a 10-minute timeout on that, I can handle the test. But it is not logical for me to make my test suite run for 10 more minutes longer, where it would actually finish in like 20 minutes in total. I don't want to make all of my tests wait on this one single test forever. But there'll be random tests which pass at times, which get timeout at times. So ideal thing to do is mark them as skipped, because we don't want this false positives or false negatives, because we don't know if the feature is broken or not, if it passes or not. So mark them as skipped, so you could go back and debug and decide if this particular test has to be part of your functional UI testing or not. Automation, when you think of automation, all of us unknowingly accept the fact that it is faster. We expect faster feedback from automation suites. So the time consumed to run the suite matters. That's another reason why we don't want to put a long timeouts in our tests and extend the time it takes to run the test suite. So we understand till there. When people think about starting a new automation, like we don't have any automation testing so far, let's start automation testing because we understand the value it brings to the team. We always tend to think, okay, all that we need to do is like choosing the right tool and having the right skill set will be equal to perfect automation, which is a big step towards automation. Yes, the tool selection and having the right skill set is a very big step and the most important step towards automation. But just having these two will not give you the results you expect from automation, right? You need to have your CI/CD pipeline if you want your automation to be, if you want to unleash all of its power. You need to have a good test environments which will not just stop working at times. You cannot have a really slow server or something, because all your tests will time out. There is no point in running an automation suite on such test environments, because it's not giving you any results and it's rather a waste of your time. Testing platforms to support your parallel execution. When we see automation, by default, we all talk about parallel execution because that is what automation is. So we need a good testing platform. It could be Sauce Labs, your Grid, or there are like a lot of testing platforms out there that'll help us build. We can build it, or even like buy a commercial testing platform. But this, having all these things together is what a complete automation is. Just because I have the right tool and skill set doesn't mean I will have a perfect automation and my test results are going to be back in minutes. Yeah, that is good, but there are these other stuff, the dependencies that we need to count when thinking of starting test automation. So when we do automation, especially for the UI, you may hear people saying, okay, why can't you bypass the API? So for the UI, at least from my understanding, we do tend to use the APIs to do all our prerequisites. So suppose I want to test a functionality on page C, but to go to page C through UI, I need to go to page A, do something, go to page B, do something, and that will land me on page C. But my test case is intended to test something on page C. So I don't need to come through A and B. I'd rather use an API. So it will do all these prerequisites and I can directly land on my page C, which makes sense because we are testing something on page C. That is what this particular test case is about. But at times, the chances are your API might not be working at some instant because they are deploying or fixing, or there is an environment. It could be multiple reasons. Thing is, API is down, so your test is not going to pass, or your test is going to get skipped because the prerequisite is not going to happen and you will not be able to do this test on the UI. But establishing your prerequisites through UI will make your test much more flakier, right? Because the functionality on page C might be working good and as expected, but something breaks on A or B, the test case is still failed for me. It's not because something failed on C, but rather it failed or A on B or wherever it is, which is not something related or not something I should be worried in this particular test case. So personally, going through the APIs is my favorite thing to do in the UI testing because it makes your test cases much less flakier. If you get a failure there, you know for sure it is because of your test. There is something wrong with the functionality of that particular test. There is a way where you could say, okay, if API is down, then let's take the route of UI, right? Because usually the chances are if your API is down, even through UI, you might be blocked because that's what your application uses. It's not some random API that's built for testing. You are consuming the actual API that's built for the application. So the chances are your application will be down, and mostly you can do it through UI as well. Or in some rare cases, maybe you can do it through the UI because this API, you can bypass it through some other way. But it is not worth switching your time between API code and UI, putting a condition and saying, okay, if you get a 502 or a bad response from API, then go through the UI, because we talked about it. It's not just about coding, it's also about maintaining your code, which in long run will be a very much painful process. And also, why do we have to do that? We are not going to ship the product well if the API is down. We will fix it. So why would we test when the API is down? As simple as that, right? If you want to ship your application, you want to ship this API to your end user, then we will test it through the API. So manual QA does this faster than automation. I used to hear this line in the very beginning, like when I started on my first project, because that was the case. The nature of the application was that way, and I had only 2 test cases covered through automation. And obviously, people I worked with, manual QA was so much smarter. They knew everything on top of their head. So obviously, they were really faster than my 2 test cases suite. But over the time, I understood, well, that is true. If I'm only testing one particular test case, yeah, sure, manual QA can do this faster. But can manual QA test multiple tests on multiple platforms at the same time? Right? Manual QA can only test on one specific browser or one specific platform. But a good automation suite will always run in parallel, meaning you are running it on multiple operating systems, on multiple browsers, and multiple tests are happening at the same time. And also, you would always choose your automation test. A good automation candidate is a repetitive test. You don't want to automate something you would test once or twice in the sprint and say, okay, all right, we tested this, we are done. No, I would never take that to be an automation. If that is not important in long run, we don't need to test that particular test, then it'll never be my automation candidate. I would always pick something that is really crucial, and it's going to be a repetitive test. And obviously, manual QA will get bored of doing repetitive job. I would get bored of doing repetitive job. That's human nature. We want something more interesting and challenging. We don't want to do the same test every single day. And humans, we are prone to error. I can guarantee sometimes I can't log into my computer because I enter password wrong. I know my password, but that's what humans are. We do get bored, and we are not programmed to do something very specific. We use our creativity. We sometimes get bored. We are different. We are not machines. So that is what automation is about. It's not just about competing against one test case, but reducing this repetitive task for humans. So the value of automation is just not about the speed of running one test individually, but having a suite of multiple tests that need to be executed multiple times on multiple platforms in parallel. That's where the entire value of automation is. If I'm doing it for one test, no, that is not going to give me any value in it. I should be able to execute it in parallel on various different platforms. That's what all automation is about. All you have to do is click a button. I'm pretty sure whoever is a test automation engineer, you might have heard this at least once when you said you don't want to run a test suite right now and again in half an hour, you'd rather do it all together, because this is how people see it. People think test automation is just clicking a button and then everything magically falls in place, which is kind of true at times. You don't even have to click a button if it is part of your CI/CD pipeline. If you just make it part of it and trigger it on every build or however you decide to make it, yeah, sure. But when your suite is not part of a pipeline, then someone has to manually change your configuration to the right server. None of us test on a single server. We have so many different servers that we would like to change or test on, and our build or whatever we are testing is not going to be on the same server every single time. We need to generate the data and feed it to the suite. Even if your framework is not data driven, there is a set of data that your automation suite needs, because it needs the values. It's not human which could understand and feed it itself. No, I give it the values and then it feeds the values into the application. So it needs this data, and we have to generate the data and feed it to the bait in form of your config files or your Excel sheets, however you do it. Values and suites must be configured to support different locales, right? If you are supporting various different locales, then you have even more stuff to take care of. Previous run was on some other local, this run you want to test something else. We do have to configure all these values. Proxy settings, if you're not talking directly, or some server requirements, someone has to check all these domain related values. And the results also have to be verified, right? After a half an hour or whatever, however long your test suite takes to run, some test engineer has to go look at the results. If there are failures, then look at it. Especially with UI, how much ever or a perfect automation you have, there will be flaky tests at time. So we usually tend to look at the reports and make sure it's not a flaky test, but rather a real bug. So when you tell your automation engineer, all you have to do is a button, it's not really just that. If you have a pipe, if you have it configured, yes, that's sure. But else you would have to do all of this configuration. Someone has to manually configure this. Or we could even make these configurations as part of automation. But again, we spoke about it. Like, we do want to have easy to maintain and a clean code. We don't want to overdo it and have too much code. Or we could set standard servers and standard locals, but that undermines the purpose of automation. We want to be as flexible as possible. I don't want to say I want to run only on US domain. I don't want to test on UK domain, or I will test only in this language, or I can only test on this server. No, that's not the point. We want to be as flexible as possible and still give us the results when we have the right test cases for those. So it's not just a click of a button. Manual QA will be automation engineers starting tomorrow. This is like another thing that most companies are coming up with, which is a great concept because we all want to learn and grow together. I'm really happy that we are looking at it that way, and companies are interested in investing the time and providing the resources so we could all learn together. But this will not happen overnight. We need to understand that time, effort, and energy must be invested. When we say manual QA, obviously I'm talking about someone who is not familiar with coding, but they got awesome skills. Like in testing, like they are the best. I understand we got these great resources. Just because they are awesome in testing does not mean they will be an estate starting tomorrow, right? We need to spend the time, effort, and energy. Obviously, I personally have seen manual QA learn and come up to speed and be estates and do really great job. But that did not happen overnight. And if you want to associate estates like your software engineers in test who build your test frameworks, they can be more closely related to developers than testers, right? If you realize there's this conception that, okay, there's a tiny difference between manual QA and automation QA. My manual QA will jump that tiny difference and be automation QA tomorrow. I personally think your software engineers in test, your automation engineers are more closely, can be closely related to your developers because they program, they code, they are not just scripting. When we talk about in-house grown frameworks, it takes a full entire programming language. Like I work on Java more than I ever work on Selenium. I do look into like my developers test code and also unit test and integration test to make sure we have what we need there. I understand code just as much as my developers understand, but the way the stuff I code for and the stuff they code for is different, sure. But you can more closely associate your software engineers in test towards your developers. If someone is willing to be an automation engineer, it is important that you know the programming language, not just supporting automation tool. Right? If I'm someone who doesn't have a programming knowledge and I want to be an automation engineer, just learning Selenium, yeah, that is good. You're investing your time. You need to learn Selenium. It's just an example that I'm taking. Is not going to make me an automation engineer. I need a programming language to support this. So I need to learn a programming language and a supporting tool. That's what makes me the automation engineer. Just scripting will not, yeah, scripting is great when you're using like a commercial tools like HP, QFT, they name UFT something, they changed the name now. But even those, every day we are seeing change and most of us are going towards in-house grown automation frameworks because we have all these needs and we want to take care of a tailor needs that are very specific to our applications. To do that, we need in-house grown automation, which is like tailor-made for our needs. And to do that, you need to have a programming skills. So if someone is thinking of being an automation engineer with no prior coding experience, that's still great. We all learned at some point. All of us did not just go to school and like in my kindergarten, I didn't know anything. We all learned it. We all started learning it at some point. So obviously manual QA will learn and pick it up. It's just that it's not going to happen overnight. We need to understand that. Automation is record and playback or one-time effort. So people sometimes, this is reducing these days, which is good. But usually in the past, or what I have experienced, people tend to think like, oh, all you have to do is record your screen and then play when someone asks you to run the test. Or you need to invest it once and then you are done. What's the big deal? There are record and playback tools, but they won't meet most of our automation needs. At least I personally never worked at a place where we just use record and playback as to create our automation suite. Those will not help us build the automation frameworks. Maybe they will help you just get like the first look of it, but if you are planning to have like a realistic, reliable test framework, test automation framework, then we need to have an in-house grown or like even like a commercial tool, which is not just record and playback, which will take your custom test cases. And when you have such frameworks, these frameworks need to be updated. It could be your plugins, your dependencies, whatever you're using with them, these needs to be updated. It's not like, okay, today I pick something, I plug in my plugin and it's not going to stay that way forever, right? We need to keep updating our frameworks. Automation test suite should be in sync with the application all the time. There's no point if my test framework is not in sync with the actual application that I'm building it to test. It changes. If the application is changed and I don't change my test framework, it is not going to generate me accurate results. Once that happens, we all lose trust in the test framework, automation framework, which is not good, because you will have invested so much of time and effort in that, and right now no one has trust in that framework, which is not what we look for. Automation test framework should be always reliable and trust. You need to have your developers, yourself, everybody, the reports generated, we need to have trust on those. If you don't keep your framework in sync with the application, we cannot build this trust. Constant enhancements are part of maintenance. When we talk about automation testing framework maintenance, we keep constantly enhancing it. It could be like tying to Jira or implementing better reporting. It could be anything, just like we do to the application. We don't do it and say, okay, this is good enough. No, we constantly improve it. We enhance it. We try to make it the best. It's the same with the automation frameworks as well. So your test code is no different than your actual code. It needs the same maintenance. It demands same attention and care. So treat your test code just like your actual application code. It is nothing different. Yeah, the purpose, they both are used for various different reasons, but the code itself, it needs the same kind of attention and maintenance that it would demand. We will report a lot of bugs with automation. So if we start test automation like from scratch, it's common to have this assumption that, okay, now that we have automation, we need to report so many more bugs because it's much faster, we can do it multiple times a day, or for whatever reason. But automation testing is primarily used to build trust. You don't want to sit there and check your application every single time. You would rather want your automation suite and say, okay, if automation suite did not report any failures, then I trust my application. These test suites at least commonly serve as smoke and regression test suites to get a first look. Okay, quickly run an automation suite to make sure nothing major is broken, or make sure nothing that we built in the past is broken because of the new fix we have. Right? That is what we mostly use our test automation suites. Things are changing these days, and we do start like in sprint test automation, where we are trying to test more than have test suites more than just smoke and regression, but have them pass at multiple levels. But even the in sprint test automation happens only after you check your application at least once manually, right? For me to start coding or scripting my automation scripts, I need to know the application, or I need to know the expected and actual behavior, or I need to know the data that I'm validating for. To do that, I follow the manual process. I see, okay, how it is being tested manually. All right, this is how we do it. So this is the automation flow we need to do. So obviously your manual testing will still report the highest number of bugs. Your annual testing will catch the highest number of bugs, which is how it is expected to be, because they get the first look at any new feature. Even if I am only doing automation, I still need to do it manually at least once. So if there is a bug, I do report that. You won't keep finding constantly bugs on some previously developed features. Obviously, sometimes it happens, but the most number of bugs are found when a new feature is developed because of tiny edge cases or whatever it is. We all work with great developers who try to make as much less of a bugs as possible, but still because of edge cases is when we see these bugs, and manual QA will always report these bugs. So automation should be seen more as building trust in the application rather than using it to just find bugs. I don't mean that automation will not report bugs. There will be times when automation will report bugs, and if automation is reporting bugs, it is a good thing, and we need to focus more on cleaning our code. Maybe we are doing something wrong, else we shouldn't be reporting so many bugs. Let's do it just because we can. It is very easy to get carried away when we have a really good and a wonderful working test suite. Oh, it is just testing whatever we ask for it to test. It's so much faster. The results are coming back so quick. It can handle any amounts of data. It is so much easier to get carried away and say, okay, now that we have this, let's test everything. But that's not needed. We need to realize the power of data, right? We don't need to test every scenario with every possible data. Like at FINRA, we work with 40 billion transactions a day. I just can't sit there and test every single thing. No, I just need to understand the various types of data that I need to pick. Pick the data to cover your various factors. Not every data is going to act the same. So pick that important data or pick the tricky data. So if we have to give an example, I'm just looking at time. So if we have to give a quick example, for suppose think we have a application where if you put in a fruit, it makes a happy face. If you enter a vegetable, it makes a sad face. So do I need to sit and enter all the fruits and vegetables? No, I'm going to just pick random fruit or random vegetable, and I may pick something non-native fruit and non-native vegetable, and I may pick tomato because it's tricky. I think it's a vegetable, but people say it's a fruit. It's nothing different than your actual manual QA data. Like, be smart about your data and pick it. Just because you can doesn't mean you should test it for all the data you have in there. No need to waste time on reports. So when you have automation testing, okay, the framework is working all good. I developed the framework, I understand the results. So great. But we need to have a better reporting. Reporting is like front end of your automation testing. How much ever your backend works great, you need the front end because that's what you see. It's not effective without a good front end. It is worth investing your time to generate easy and understandable reports. Having a great report saves you a lot of time in analyzing the reports and debugging. Especially for me, I really like reports to have information, especially when debugging flaky tests. These are your lifesavers if you are debugging something. And reports are your best asset to sell automation to business. If you're thinking of just starting automation, reports is what you can use to sell it to your business. So just to give a comparison, on the left side is with, this is Allure. It's a plugin you can just plug into your homegrown report. A homegrown automation framework is just a reporting plugin. There are like great number of reporting plugins. Extent reports, that's another great one. And there are multiple of them. So on the right side, this is how, if you don't have like a good reporting plugin, obviously whoever developed this, they might be able to look at it and say, okay, great, this is what failed, this is what passed. But if someone else runs it tomorrow, or even for me to debug it, it's not the same. So it is worth investing your time in a good reporting tool. Let's automate everything. So once we start automation, we tend to say, okay, we can automate everything, but 100% automation is a dream. It's not going to happen. Certain areas like performance, load, or stress testing, yes, this can be 100% automated, but user interface, documentation, or installation, this kind of stuff cannot be 100% automated. And also remember that UI tests are most expensive tests in terms of your test run times, resources, everything. It makes them very much expensive. So pay attention to integration tests, which will be much cheaper and still reliable. You still know if the services are working as expected or not, and they are going to be much cheaper in terms of execution times. No more manual QA needed. It's a big one. Anytime an organization starts, okay, well, let's bring in test automation, some people start panicking, oh my God, no more QA, manual QA needed. Or some people start celebrating, no more manual. But it's not going to happen. We will always need manual QA. Automation testing is a lot less flexible than manual testing. Yes, automation testing may help reduce the number of manual QA, sure, but human judgment is always needed in testing. Your code won't get creative. Your code can do ad hoc testing. Your code doesn't randomly go around and say, okay, this doesn't look good to me. As long as it matches A matches B, that's what you give in your code, it is all fine. The purpose of automation testing is to reduce the repetitive work, help manual QA in a way it can help. It's not a competition. It does not mean it has to take over manual QA. No, it just reduces the repetitive work.
Karishma, just to give you a heads up, there are a number of questions that people are asking, so
Okay.
you can wrap up and we can actually go into
Sure.
that.
This is the last slide, I guess. So you will always need your manual QA. So to summarize what we have been over, automation, when did the right way, is going to be a great, valuable asset. But automation will demand skills, time, and maintenance. You cannot deny it. Full power of automation can be unleashed when paired well with supporting tools, such as testing platforms, reporting, CI pipeline, etc., which we saw previously. This is how you contact me. If we want to keep talking about this or questions, you say, whatever you said is completely wrong, or why did you say this? Please feel free to reach out. Sure, Joe. Let me quickly look at Q&A.
No, don't worry. I will go over that because it's actually very scattered. And by the way, you actually generated quite a lot of interesting chat on, on the Slack channel. So you can go into that a little bit later on.
I'm guessing my screen is all blank.
Oh, don't worry about that.
Okay, all right.
So going over, there are a couple of questions here. There are plenty of questions. I'm going to pick two of them. You mentioned quite a lot the term automation engineer. The question is, do you see this as a valuable role, whereas other people think that it's better to have, because it sounds like someone who's solely focused on automation, wouldn't it be better to have a tester who actually codes? I mean, try to have a little bit more of the mix in there.
Sure. I did use the term a lot. The term SDET is initially coined by Microsoft, software test engineer in development. This is someone who understands testing and development. And that's what I mean when I say automation engineer. I see your point. Why have someone specifically do this when you can have someone who do both manual and automation? As I mentioned, even to do automation, I need to go over manual testing at least once because I don't know my flow or what I'm doing. As I said before, your best bet is like pick someone with programming skills and ask them to do manual testing than the other way. I believe we all need to have the programming skills.
Okay. And again, there are another number of people talking about that. I will take only another question here. So I saw, well, I will even modify it a little bit because I like the idea. And it's about people who think that automation should not only run on the staging environment, but maybe sometimes even on production environments. And if you have any experience on that, and how can you actually make it successful? Have you done it? Do you have any tips for people who want to do that?
Sure. Yes, we have done it once. I personally am not a fan of running it in production environment. You should have environment which replicates your production, even your stage environments. Especially the case when we did it was like I was in a hotel management system and we just made so many reservations. The hotel started calling us crazy back because it's production. There were actual reservations happening. So it depends on the type of application you are doing. If you don't care what you're doing in your production, it's still fine. Yeah, maybe. It depends on your need. But personally, I would say always try to mirror your test or stage environments to your production environment. You shouldn't have a question. If it works on stage, it should work on production.
Okay, great. And again, there are plenty of additional questions on the Slack channel, and I'm not sure that we have quite a lot of time to continue going over them again, one by one, but I really appreciate all of the points that you brought. And again, and people can actually go into Slack regardless if we're talking about automation as something that helps testing, or automation, again, in any other role, I think that all of the points that you brought are very, very important. And anyone who's going to be writing automation to help their testing or to help their process should actually learn quite a lot on that. So Karishma, thank you very, very much. You will have quite a lot of stuff to actually answer here on the chat, but thank you very, very much for your chat.
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone. I will connect with you guys on Slack right away. I see someone asked about the tool. It's a Puppeteer from Google. I can talk about it on Slack. Thank you so much for joining this late. You've been a delightful audience. I will try to answer all your questions.
Excellent. Guys, we have right now a 15 minutes break before we go over to our closing keynote of the day by James Bach. So please go ahead, make your last coffee of today. You shouldn't drink as much as I have. And we'll catch up in about 15 minutes. Thank you very much.